Hey everyone, Jexie here. Welcome back to another video. So this is going to be one of my reaction time videos where I take an issue and we're going to look at it a little bit more in depth. Something happened on May 2nd that had huge implications for those of us who were worried about the opioid crisis and other policies that are going around the country. And it's blown my mind that more people aren't talking about this. And so I thought we'd discuss it here on my channel today. Hey, okay, so what I want to talk to you about and what I think is really important is about the Insys trial that just took place in Boston. The jury, it was a really long trial, and the jury deliberated for 15 days. On May 2nd, all the top execs, including the CEO, were found guilty of things like racketeering and bribery. The claims were doctors that they ran a scheme where they paid doctors to overprescribe Subsys, which is an under-the-tongue fentanyl spray, to overprescribe that to patients who may not have needed it in order to make big bonus checks. They also got in trouble for pretending to be doctors and calling insurance companies and making false claims about illnesses that patients had so that they could get the medication covered by insurance. This is a big deal, and I'm going to read you a quote that I pulled out from one of the articles. And it says, "This is important because it's the first ever conviction of a drug company CEO in the federal government's fight to combat the opioid crisis." So we hear about all these lawsuits going on, but for me, this one's not only important for everybody, it's also very personal. So I'm going to share with you not just why this matters on a grand scale of things, but why this matters to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I'm actually related to this case in a more personal way. Some of you who know me in real life already know this, but for those of you who don't know me in real life, it'll be something new. I do have to put a disclaimer out there that I will be speaking, maybe some things will be a little vague, or I may leave certain things out because there is still open lawsuits, and I don't want to say or do anything that could jeopardize that. So I'm going to tell you my own personal experience and why I truly believe that Insys needs to be held responsible, and why I'm so grateful to see that they're actually being held responsible. We all know that the opioid crisis is an actual problem, right? Like, people overdosing on fentanyl is not like a thing that's talked about but not really affecting anybody. We all know that it's killing people, and it's a real problem. And when you hear of a company who purposely addicted people to fentanyl because it made them a lot of money, it should make you really angry to find out that somebody is purposely creating addictions in people so they can make money off of them, and make money off of them until they die. Many people who took prescribed doses of this medication died. Some of the lawsuits that are out there are because of deaths. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and I cannot even tell you how shocked I am that more people aren't talking about this. Because the fact is that as somebody in recovery, we're generally advocates for combating things like the opioid crisis, right? We want people to get better. We want people to find recovery, right? But we also have to look on the legislative side, right? We should also be big fighters when we see some type of injustice. And what Insys is doing was injustice. It was flat out killing people, and they knew it. So why am I very passionate about this issue? So my ex-husband is a victim of this whole Insys scheme. It's a little hard to talk about, and I will leave links. I will leave tons of links in my description box. Probably enough links that you could go on all day. But my ex-husband was in many of the stories, and I'll share those with you as well. So, How did this affect me? My ex-husband was injured in Iraq, and he had a lot of issues. He had traumatic brain injury and PTSD and back issues and knee issues, and he had been on a ridiculous amount of pain meds for years. And he was seeing the same pain management doctor for quite some time. And we really believed that this doctor had his best interests. I'll speak for myself. I really believed it. I really believed that he was looking out for my husband at the time in any way he could. And we trusted him. We trusted him a lot. So there was a period of time a few years back where my ex-husband was going to emergency rooms regularly. And it was becoming a problem. He would get headaches, or he'd get back flares, and he was constantly in and out of the emergency room. And he was already taking a lot of pain meds, but he needed additional pain meds to combat like back flare pain, like when his back would, like, he'd slip and fall and hurt himself or something, and it would be 10 out of 10 pain, and he had to do something about it. And so he would go to the ER, and his doctor had like written a letter that was like, look, this is what I would suggest. Now, they don't have to follow it, obviously, like the doctor just gives you a suggestion. But so for a while, the emergency rooms were helpful, but it got to a point where they stopped being helpful. And so his doctor had an idea, and he said, why don't you try Subsys again, which is an under-the-tongue fentanyl spray. I'll post it up. And it was supposed to be used for when he had back flares. He would be able to take the Subsys for a couple of days and use it for breakthrough pain. And for me, like, that made sense. And, it would keep him out of the ER, and it did. And that, and it worked. But somehow over time, his doctor started replacing all of his medications with more and more Subsys. Now, if you read the pamphlet on the inside of a Subsys box, I'll see if I can find a printout and post it. I'm almost positive, sorry if I'm mistaken because I don't have it pulled up right now, but that the maximum dose anybody should take, and mind you, this is only approved for cancer patients. Cancer patients who are like on their deathbed about to die, and they have breakthrough pain, and like, what can you give them so that like they're, not in excruciating pain? Like, that's what this is made for. This is made for people who are on their deathbed. And so it says on the insert in the medication that under no circumstances should you take more than 800 micrograms every 4 hours. That was like the max dose, okay? 800 micrograms every 4 hours. I'm going to probably post these numbers here so you can really visualize what I'm about to tell you. By the time my ex-husband was on the highest dose that he had been prescribed, he was taking 1,600 micrograms every 4 hours. That's double the max dose. And also every 4 hours in between, he was taking another 800 micrograms. So every 2 hours, he was either taking 800 micrograms or 1,600 micrograms of Subsys, which is unreal. Someone like me or you, who is not used to taking pain meds, could probably take one 800 microgram Subsys spray and die. We probably could take a 400 microgram spray and die. That's how strong it is. So he had been on this super massive high dose for a long time. I think it was like 2 years or something. And I started to get worried because I started to really notice cognitive problems. His memory was going. He became really, really moody. He became scary. Now, mind you, he had brain damage. So some of these things like he had had before, but I am telling you, what that fentanyl spray turned him into, These were not his old injuries acting up type of thing. They changed him. He's still struggling. He's been off fentanyl for, I don't know, 2 years now or something? And he's still not back to the person that he was before he started, and they don't think he's ever going to get back. That's why my kids and I had to leave. He became so unstable that it was no longer safe for him to be around his children. I mean, luckily he's been getting help, and so he's a little bit more stable now, but he's not better. And, for them to say that there's no way to fix him. And it's just awful to see how cold they were. So many would say, like, well, that's just his doctor's fault and stuff like that. Well, once we got more information is when he decided to sue. We found out that his doctor was getting paid big, big money every time they upped his dose. This doctor, who I trusted that he was taking care of my husband at the time in the best of his ability. And maybe he was for a time. But if you know that upping a prescription dose is going to put $4,000 in your pocket like that, why wouldn't you? I mean, you got to think about it. Every month, I think it was every month, I have to double check the paperwork, but it seemed like every month he was getting paid at least $4,000 for upping my ex-husband's dose. Now just think about that. $4,000 a month. That's like an average family's, like, low middle class, like, as a single person, if I made $4,000 a month, like, I'd be living large, right? So he's making enough money off one patient. When we first brought light to this issue, it was treated very much like, we don't attack big pharma. Doctors can do what they want. And slowly over time, without giving up, we stayed our course. My ex-husband has an incredible lawyer who's really been in it for the long haul. And the most important thing about the whole case was to bring attention to the fact that this company was essentially getting away with murder. And for once, they're being held accountable. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of information that I missed, and that's why I said I put a lot of the links below, because I had someone say to me the other day, and this was really disappointing to hear. Someone said to me the other day, we were discussing the case and stuff like that, and they said, I have a hard time believing that Big Pharma bothered to pay doctors for overwriting prescriptions. And I was like, well, you can have trouble believing it all you want. The fact is that they have emails. Like, they have evidence that shows that. Like, that's not made up. Like, the civil case people have it. I am sure they have it in the Boston case. And he's like, well, maybe you think that, but I just don't believe that. What? How is it that you can say you don't believe something when there's evidence to show that it can? If your perspectives on things are that, people are just going after Big Pharma because they're looking for somebody to blame for the opioid crisis, then you're blinded by the responsibility that they do have. Now, are they totally to blame? Should we all rally against Insys and the other big pharma companies and say, like, every addict who's been addicted to something is because of you? No, of course not. That would be ridiculous. And nobody's saying that. But the fact is, when you get people who are addicted to high doses of fentanyl, you run into a problem. See, my ex-husband was on such high doses of fentanyl, they couldn't get him off of it. They decided that they were going to have to put him in like a twilight coma and cold turkey him off. Because I took him from that doctor, and I brought him to a specialist that I knew of, And they said, and we met with an anesthesiologist and an addiction doctor, and they had talked about it for a long time to try and come up with how they were going to get him off, because you can't taper down off of those doses of fentanyl. And both the anesthesiologist and the addiction doctor didn't understand how he was alive with the levels of fentanyl in his system. And they couldn't believe it. They're like, well, in order to taper, we'd have to drop you lower, but the withdrawal was too bad. He couldn't do that. Like, it was, you can't withdraw off with that high doses of fentanyl and not be excruciatingly ill to the point where they were worried it would kill him. So they were going to put him in a twilight coma so that he would be under, they would keep him under for the whole weekend and cold turkey his system. And then after 3 days of that, they would see where he's at and then go from there. So that was the plan. The problem with the plan became apparent pretty much immediately when they gave him propofol. It's like the milky white stuff that they use to put you to sleep for surgery. It's supposed to put you to sleep. It's supposed to knock you out. They use it for surgeries for people, right? Like, that's what they use. They gave it to him in like a super high dose, and they couldn't keep him in the bed. He was like wide awake, like everything's great. So now they really didn't know what to do. So eventually they pretty much like calmed him down with super high doses of benzos and tried to cold turkey him. And look, they did what they could, and they eventually got him off. It was not an easy road. He was very sick for a while, but luckily they took care of him in that hospital. They really cared. And I remember the anesthesiologist saying to me, like, and the addiction doctor, how could any doctor prescribe these types of doses? Like, it's fatal. Like, this would kill a person. The fact that he was walking around alive after being on those doses for so long was like amazing. You tell people, you go up to anybody, any addiction doctor who knows about fentanyl, and tell them the doses that my ex was on, and watch their face. They'll tell you it's impossible. They'll tell you there's no way that somebody took those doses and was functioning as a person. It's insane. The last thing I'll share with you is I did have to do like an 8-hour deposition with the doctor's attorney, my ex-husband's attorney, and the pharmaceutical company attorney. And it was crazy because they were literally trying to paint it that my ex had all sorts of problems after war. And that's why he was all messed up. I remember being like, you're joking, right? Like, I've lived with a man for 11 years. I saw him messed up after war. We lived at Walter Reed together. Like, I was there through the medical discharge process. Like, I'm with him every day. Let me tell you, I know what his after-war injuries were, and some days they were rough. But that is different. Those were symptoms. His whole person changed after fentanyl. He's not the same man. He's almost not fully capable of caring for himself in the way he was before Subsys. I mean, this medication destroyed him, and he can't get that back. So when we see things like this Boston trial, where people are being held accountable, we should be applauding from the rooftops. We should be sharing this information with everybody. Look, to combat the opioid crisis, to have people not die that we love from addiction, we need to come at it from all angles. There's no one solution. We can deal with the individual addict by loving them and trying to get them into recovery. We can deal with things on a import scale to not let these drugs come in from cartels from other countries, right? However we do that, I don't know. Apparently we're getting fentanyl from China or something. That's a whole nother story. But we also hold doctors and pharmaceutical companies accountable when they do the wrong thing. Now, I want to say one more thing before I end this video. There are a lot of people out there who are pain patients who get very frustrated with the attack with the opioid crisis because it affects them being able to get the medications they need. I think it's really important that we separate the two. We need to acknowledge that there are people who need those medications, right? I don't think Subsys should be taken off the market for everybody. I think Subsys would probably be great for people who are on their deathbed from cancer and have some pain. I think that even if they overdosed on something like Subsys and as their, seems like a good way to do that. What's the Dr. Kevorkian thing? Euthanasia. You take a bunch of Subsys and you fall asleep and don't wake up, right? So I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying I can see that like validity to some of these medications. People who swear by needing Percocet or Oxycontin, whatever, right? It's not to say that we should throw them all away. Some people think that, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that when we find pharmaceutical companies and doctors who are doing the wrong thing, we should hold them accountable. Because if not, then it puts them in the same light as doctors who are doing the right thing. That's where the problem lies. So, like, together, we need to celebrate these victories. We should all be shouting from the rooftops. These people are, look, they're going to appeal, there's a whole process, but whatever. A jury found them guilty. That matters. That paves the way for other people to come forward, for other companies to be held responsible, and for doctors to think twice before they overprescribe medication to pad their bank account. So, sorry, I'm a little passionate on this issue. Thank you so much for watching. I know this video is a little longer. If you like it, please leave a like. I would love to hear your thoughts. Did you know about this story? Do you have any information you'd like to share? Feel free to leave a comment. It helps me a ton if you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching and for all your support and yeah. Thank you, and I hope you guys are having a great week. I'll see you all soon. Bye.